Or Mark, are one of you making sure that we're live?
Yeah, we just went live.
Okay, cool. Right. Go for it.
Right. The meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the May 12th, 2024 meeting of the City of Asheville Noise Advisory Board. My name is Reb Hazlett, chairperson of the NAB. Committee members and staff are participating virtually today. We're streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the Noise Advisory Board page. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. I will now introduce board members who are participating virtually. First, please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Board members, as I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. Jessica.
Present.
Rick Freeman is excused his absence today. Jeff Santiago.
Present.
David Ledger.
Present.
And then we are also joined today by Todd Justice, the city administrator, and Mark Matheny, head of development services for the city of Asheville. With that, we can turn to our agenda. And Todd, I'll start with you on just noise administration FECN. Any reports you may have or information you might want to share with us? Yes, Jessica.
We need to approve the minutes.
The minutes. Let me back up then. Can I have a motion to approve the April minutes?
I motion to approve the April minutes.
Second. Jeff, thank you.
I second it.
Jessica, you motion. Dave?
Yes. Yes.
You approve the minutes?
Approve. Yes.
Okay, Jeff, you seconded. I also approve, so the minutes are approved. Todd, any noise administration report?
No, we in getting our data together for the beginning of the year for our board report to the commission, it looks like the trend is basically the same it has been on the first couple years we were doing this, a little bit less numbers overall, but for the most part, still pretty much the same. And the biggest contributor to those numbers continues to be residential noise complaints, which it's very difficult for us to do anything about. The business community, industrial community, we can regulate them and get them to play ball with us and that sort of thing, but just people in their neighborhoods, we don't have a whole lot we can do with that. So those numbers will continue to be the majority of the complaints we get, I believe, and the trend or the trend will be the same as far as that's concerned going forward.
Right. And a potentially intractable problem, but Jeff, we have put as part of our agenda with the Environment and Public Safety Committee the question of whether we can designate one of the 3 citywide positions as specifically multifamily, which I think is a great idea. So we're going to pose that question, and I mean, I can't see why there would be any objection to that. It makes a ton of sense given the number of complaints that come from multifamily. Anybody? Jessica, you had noted some anomalies when we were discussing, talking earlier today in the report. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Todd, if you don't mind, I have two quick questions. I noticed that the industrial operations and equipment complaints jumped pretty significantly. Is that, do you know offhand, is that what's causing that?
So I do not know the detail of those numbers, but I do know that we have seen an increase of people complaining about construction downtown the last few weeks. I've seen a number of those come across my desk. People complaining about some of the construction sites working on the weekends or working after hours, because that's regulated by noise that falls under noise. So
disturbance. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then my other question was just could you explain what's with the ongoing investigation monitoring jumping from like 3 to 34 from March to April?
I'm sorry, which statistic are you talking about?
So with the for the status of the complaint code description, that there was in March there was 3 ongoing investigation monitoring, and then in April that number is 34. Is that just things got reclassified that were somewhere else? It's on the second page of the.
Yeah. Give me a second. Let me look at it here. Ongoing investigation. I'll need to talk to Daniel about that. I don't know why that's such a huge increase. That one got by me. I didn't see that.
All good.
But I will ask and send you guys an email after we meet here.
That's all I had, Reb.
Okay, good. Anybody else on questions on administration, enforcement? All right, we'll go on to old business. Mark, I'm glad you could hang on for a second, because really the most pressing agenda item we have at the moment is preparing for the May 20th. Todd, I don't know if you caught that or not, but we thought we got shifted to June, but that got reversed back to May the 20th. So we're back on the May 20th agenda, what puts a little pressure on us to pull together a presentation. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. The challenge is us getting together with you, Mark, prior to that time, based on your thought that we would merge that presentation, agreeing where possible, and stating our positions if not in agreement about certain things. But we certainly, Jessica and I certainly would like to get with you to see how we put that together. As a board, yeah, Mark, go ahead. You raise your hand, Mark.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thanks. And just real quickly, I don't want to capture your train of thought, but just what we want to think about in talking with Deborah on Friday about whether there's potential for this to change or not. Doesn't sound like there is potential for this to change dates, but also what she really wants to see is basically you guys provide your presentation, and then we would provide our presentation. And so I think your train of thought still works, and I still think we want to incorporate those conversations that we're going to have. But I just want you to know, while you're saying that basically they want to see it in 2 presentations. So that's the only thing I wanted to say.
Actually, I think that simplifies our job.
Yeah.
Because as a board, we've largely come to consensus on those items that we would like to include in that presentation. I don't think there will be much disagreement. I think the one item that Jessica, Jeff, and I have all agreed on is whether we could seek some consideration about changing some of the construction hours just on the weekend, maybe a couple of hours shaved off on a Saturday, and slide from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. from maybe 8 to 6 or something like that. It's a punishing amount of noise for people living in residential districts, and certainly downtown. And I'm familiar with the project over here in Beaver Dam. It's called it's a pretty big scale housing development in the valley. You can set your clock to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And on the weekend, it's one thing on the weekday, but on the weekend at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., that's asking a lot of people, particularly in residential areas. And that's the only thing that we've never committed to writing that I think is something we might address. Unless, Mark, you think there's a problem. I posed it to Ben Woody too, but it seems like something we ought to talk about. Otherwise, I think Jeff and Jessica and Dave, we've kind of reached some firm conclusions about what our presentation will be. Does that sound okay to you, Mark?
Excuse me. Yeah. I think that's fine. Obviously, as you come into any of these items, And that's kind of the whole idea, right? Is to evaluate what works, what doesn't work, how it's doing. And you know, there's probably a big engagement piece in this for that industry, while it also is for our community, probably an engagement into that construction industry as well, just to, you know, to kind of fully vet the whole thing. And you know, you're going to, you know, I mean, obviously we kind of, it's very visual as to where the signs are going to be on that, but yeah, no issue with that. I just an understanding that, you know, it's probably a process to work through that. And I'm sure that's what the committee's going to ask, you know, what has been done as far as that goes, and that sort of thing.
Welcome.
And it just,
Thank you, Mark, and welcome, Daniel. I think we might circle back to administration just for a moment. There was in the report numbers, the unclosed cases, those under investigations number jumped up to something, I think like 34, which seemed to be much higher than ordinary. Is there some explanation for that?
I think I can answer that. Good to see everybody. So the way the IM works in terms of still under investigation, is that what you're talking about, the closed code IM?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is I'll get, for example, today, May 13th, I'll get a complaint. It starts either today or tomorrow. That person will get a call back, email, whichever way they contacted me, I have to contact them back. Sometimes I don't hear from them in 30 days. In 30 days, if I don't hear from them, I close it out as don't have enough information, things like that. So some months might be heavier or not, but basically everybody gets at least a 30-day window to try to respond on however it is that they contacted me through Asheville app, email, voicemail, whatever it is. You'd be surprised at how many people just do not return. I say, hey, I just need more information. I don't have an address. You said you had a video, but I don't see it attached. And then you never hear from them again. So that's why those numbers, you'll notice there shouldn't be anything open for January, February. Those should all already be closed. And then while we're within our month, you should have the highest numbers there. That's how IM works.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yep. Makes sense to everybody? All right. Good. Jessica, coming back to preparation for a minute, I don't know that we need to go into it point by point today, what sort of visuals, how the presentation goes together. If you want to, we can set a meeting for this week and you and I can talk. And then, Mark, I think we can loop together via email. It's probably less important to meet in person now, and we can just exchange information since they're separate presentations. We did, regarding vehicular noise, we did hear back from Lieutenant McClanahan regarding our letter to APD. He has forwarded our letter to John Maddox in the city attorney's office, and I think that was just this morning, so there's really nothing more to report there. We're still hopeful that the letter passes muster with the various departments so that we can get that into the hands of officers on the street during the heavy weekend periods. Yeah, Todd.
So I happened to be in a meeting with Maddox I guess it was Friday. Mark and I were in a meeting with, well, actually it was the meeting that he just referred to with Deborah last week. And John Maddox basically explained that one of the primary concerns for the PD is how an increased number of traffic stops might lead to increased uses of force, and getting into those types of situations for what is essentially just a small civil ordinance matter. And so they are working through evaluating how they want to approach that. And not, they have no way said, hey, we're not going to do this or whatever. It's just, that's the process that they're working through. I wanted to share that with the group.
No, I mean, it's not an unreasonable thing to look at, I think, and the way the world works now, limiting those sorts of conflicts is probably good. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, and to continue part of that conversation, just always to keep it in the back of the mind is where APD is capacity-wise as well, right? So that's why some of these conversations end up where they do. is just where they're prioritizing their resources, honestly. So we just always have to keep that in mind.
We're aware of the stretched resources at APD. We were trying to make as light a footprint as possible, and hopefully, under some circumstances, we'd be able to rein in some of the vehicular noise, but we're attuned to their needs. So we'll just wait and see what the opinion is and take it from there. Okay. Likewise, one of the things, Jessica, on signage that we are hoping to present to the committee is asking for some assistance in thinking through this signage problem. Our sandwich boards were rejected. We're not sure about the banners, but maybe we can find some common ground for where signs can go that's not so difficult on a temporary basis on the weekend, so that we can warn motorists of the fact that there is a noise ordinance and there are fines associated with that ordinance up to certain limits. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think, per Mark's comment, and every time that we've presented to, whether it's Environment and Safety Committee or the police department, we've always started those conversations with, we know that this isn't the highest priority for you. For us trying to make an impact in what our mission of the board is supposed to be, we feel like vehicle noise is something that, it's something that we feel like we can have an impact on. And so I feel like going to Environment and Safety Committee again on Monday, that presentation really needs to be like, we keep saying, we know that this isn't a priority, that, safety is a priority. This is somewhat tied to safety. And while we know it's not, we continue to say that. However, we're getting met with resistance from the signs thing. So can we get some help in this arena of figuring out how we can make that work so that we're not necessarily putting it on law enforcement, so to speak. And Mark, just so you know, the letter has been about, knowing that this is not a priority. However, if it's just a matter of one of those things where just making the officers that are working downtown more aware of, if you see something, to be able to do something, just to call it out is like, if there's nothing else that's more pressing sort of situation. But it is good to hear what Todd said from Maddox, just because that's something that we, again, we don't know what we don't know. So understanding that the concern of it escalating to use of force, completely understand that is also an issue that we, didn't know we need to take into consideration. All the more reason why maybe, getting some support from city staff and government to, do some signs would be great.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. And, thinking through that and thinking kind of the I'll just call it a drill or the actions after like last year's presentation and the options of sandwich boards or mounting to things within the public works. And they basically all just came to kind of a dead end. But I wonder, everybody can agree that it's still a good idea to get information out there. And I wonder if there's almost a kind of a separate view of like I don't know what to say, like a marketing campaign, like a social media campaign. I mean, and I don't know how that targets and what that looks like, but I wonder, if there's a narrative that could be developed to make awareness. And then, every Thursday that goes out, in some version of social media that just makes people who might be downtown aware, people who might who might drive around there. I think there's maybe a way to kind of look at that aspect of it as well. We know, thinking basically the physical part, there's a lot of barriers to the actual physical part of information, but maybe there's not barriers to a virtual or a social media aspect to it.
Does the city have a social media site where those sorts of announcements are made routinely?
We do, and we advertise, and we hit probably the 3 or 4 main ones. We have a department, it's called CAPE. I can't think of the acronym, but but yeah, and so we do, and I'm not sure kind of where we sit with that, but that's certainly something to have as part of the conversation, as to maybe that happens over a period of time in working with that tape department within our own social media way. And then maybe as an organization, you guys have one, and then maybe the city is open to doing that too. I don't know what those details look like, but there's potential for that, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. NAB doesn't really have its own form of social media. No.
You know what's funny is sometimes I see these trucks, that have the modified mufflers and things like that. They actually have their social media accounts as a decal on them because this is part of their thing.
Really?
So maybe the city can tag them and shame them publicly for their behavior.
We probably wouldn't do that.
I mean, I know the city's not going to do. I know. I saw Daniel's eyes get big. Like we are not going to do that. I'm not getting into a comment war on Snapchat or Instagram with
But I think that leads to a good point that a lot of it on the weekends is organizational. There are clubs, vehicle clubs that come down as a group. They get together and, rather intentionally or unintentionally, they contribute to the noise downtown. And so it might be easy to contact them and through the group or through the club once we can get those identified. Just like we've done with the buskers, we've kind of tried to get them organized and so we can reach out and engage with them when we need to. But yeah, I think the social media thing is probably a good idea to explore for sure.
That's a good thought, Todd. Thank you. All right. Anything else on vehicular noise or signage? I'm going to move on just briefly to board composition. This is another ask for the committee, and that is whether we can change one of our citywide residential positions to be specifically out of multifamily, whether that's management or residence. I don't know that it matters as long as we have a representative, given that 50% of our complaints come through multifamily. The other one was whether we might be able to add a position relative to public health. Sometimes I know Jessica and myself and Jeff were sort of puzzled at the public health dimension of chronic noise and its effect, and it being, having someone be able to inform us what the net result of some of these noise problems would be. That's an ask we're going to make. The other thing about board composition, I did make a recommendation to City Council based on applications we received from 2 individuals that I have passed on to the city. So we'll wait to hear back from City Council on whether or not we're joined in the near future with 2 new members. Anything else on board composition? Yeah, Mark.
Sorry to be talking every time, but
it's all right.
And I just want to, and you make a great point. This is not uncommon for a lot of organizations that we've all been part of. And one thing that I've found historically in places where I can't change the actual structure is that, and I know committee work is always difficult to raise people up, but almost creating a committee, a subcommittee, an ad hoc group, or something like that within your board that allows for these people to participate, right? And maybe, if one was created, and then you could have 3 positions that you'd really like input from to actually be there. And so it could just be a subcommittee that acts as basically a link or a liaison or a connector from their industry into what the board needs. So just a food for thought on I don't know what direction the committee will take on adding or modifying the board, but here, this is kind of a plan B or a default that could help as well.
Yeah. No, that's a good thought. We've never been able to fill the construction position, so it's remained open. I think briefly at the advent of the formation of the board, there was a construction representative that, for whatever reason, is no longer there, and no one has ever filled those shoes. And so we thought we might be able to change that one. And then it just seems to make so much sense to find someone from multifamily to be a member of the board. Easy to do, simple change, I think, to the ordinance insofar. I mean, that one could even be done informally. But either way, I think that's a good idea, Mark. All right. New business. Jessica and I and who else was on the call, Jessica? But we had a good meeting with Daniel and Chris at enforcement about the use of power washers in off hours. And there was a good recommendation made to create some language somewhere in the ordinance, possibly tied to construction, so that there was a limitation on the use of that power equipment during the hours or between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Apparently there's a lot of covert power washing that takes place for one reason or another in the middle of the night. And I think Jessica and I agreed this was sort of an easy one. The only reason we were puzzled about it is because we're not sure where the best place for the language to go. And we had hoped maybe to talk to city attorney about that, but it is something that we're pursuing. Thoughts?
Daniel, do you want to maybe give the rest of the board a little bit of input to what the issue's been with it?
Sure. I don't have the document in front of me, but I would say about maybe did I have like 20 complaints or so since 22. Pretty much the majority of pressure washing complaints that we get are in the downtown CBD area. And then it happens anywhere between 11 p.m., possibly 2 in the morning, all the way through 6 in the morning. And this is either through cleaning buildings or restaurant equipment, whatever the situation is. The hard part about responding to a complaint to a constituent is there is no language in the ordinance, which makes it more difficult. As the way the ordinance is written now, CBD is controlled basically by a decibel level, no matter what you do, unless you're a busker, you're on public space or right of way, which added a little difficulty to our conversation because Reb had asked, where's the actual power washer? Which was interesting because I never thought of that. So the power washers usually, it's not a little one like we would have in our garages. These guys come with trucks. So where's the truck? It's in the street. So if it's in the street based on the ordinance, so is that a noise disturbance because it's on public right of way? Okay, so at that point, now you've extended that noise disturbance complaint to 24/7. You're going to get pushback on all these power washers of saying, when am I going to be able to do my job? So no matter where you put it, it's a lot harder. Now, once the power washer is, they're working on a building or whatever it is that they're doing, that they're washing a sidewalk, whatever, now that could be considered a decibel disturbance. If I go out there with a power washer with just my little power washer from Lowe's, I guarantee you it's a violation. These guys are industrial trucks. They're gonna fail. So they fail the decibel level. They fail the noise disturbance. These guys are never gonna have our city clean. So that was my part with having this many. If we had like 1 or 2 complaints, maybe we can figure it out. But we have a lot of complaints on our log since 22 for downtown. I think it was 17 or 18 out of the 20 that we have. Now, if this were residential, completely different, because that is a noise disturbance in a residential area. I can say, hey, you're power washing at 4 o'clock in the morning, not cool. But you're in CBD, it makes it a little more difficult. So that was the gist of bringing this up, of saying, I have nothing in the ordinance that even mentions or comes across of saying, how do we treat power washers? It was basically just an oversight back in 2020 and 21 when all this was coming around, and who would have ever thought that power washing was a thing? And here's where we are. There's nothing in the ordinance that allows me to enforce when a power washer company, pressure washer, can actually do their job.
Todd.
Yeah, so, I mean, this isn't, I guess I differ with Daniel here that on the last statement he made, which is that we can look at the ordinance and see that, but with regards to construction, that the city deems excessive noise between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. to be a nuisance and to be a problem that needs to be dealt with. And so what I have directed him to do is, if the power washing is occurring between those hours, to go ahead and send them a warning for a noise disturbance, because relying on the hours of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Through other parts of the ordinance, that's what we're doing with. So it's kind of a Band-Aid, and I'm in total agreement with Daniel that we need to get language that is, and I wouldn't just limit it to power washers. We need to, come up with a definition that includes generators, any sort of pump truck or whatever that falls outside of construction that might be, that might pull up to a business at 5 a.m. and start roaring away with whatever it is that they're doing. We definitely need language to do that. It's not that we're not doing anything about it currently. We have addressed most of these issues, but it would be a lot easier on Daniel and the compliance department if we had clear language that addressed this particular problem.
Well, I assume that the reason the language is intended to go under construction is because it includes both disturbance. Well, it doesn't matter. It's a disturbance. But it's also a limitation of hours. It puts a strict limitation on hours on disturbances. Is that why, Daniel, you think it's best located under construction as some form of maintenance, or we'll figure out the language? But
Right, because when I saw after a while reading the ordinance a few times, I realized landscaping was in there, and I wondered why landscaping was under construction. And when I get leaf blowers or lawn mowers going at 5, 6 in the morning, it's easy to say, hey, leaf blowers and lawn mowers are landscaping. So therefore, it's a prohibition. You can't do it outside the hours of 7 to 7 and nothing on Sundays. And I never, ever get pushback for landscaping, for any type of lawn equipment, which could be loud. A leaf blower here in CBD, we once went out and took a reading from the guy across the street in our church, guaranteed was a violation. So it's easier for landscaping. That's why it's easier for landscaping for lawn equipment, which is loud, which is why I'm thinking, where can we put pressure washers? Because they're loud. So we need to be able to allow them to work at some point.
right. Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want to interrupt the conversation, but it is a good conversation. I just want to let you guys know we are including this as one of our recommended changes at the committee meeting next Monday. Oh. We're actually including it on one of our slides on the presentation. We've got some ones that we think are required changes, and then we've got this one and something along this line that is a recommended change. So we are going to call this out from our side as well.
Are you making a recommendation to place it under construction?
We're not going that far yet. We don't, and I say that just because we haven't vetted it fully yet. I think we all need to kind of work through what that looks like, including legal. And we're just going to identify that we know that we need to get together. And I want to tell the committee that we're all working together to figure out how to word this. But we do recommend that something addressing this exists where it didn't exist before.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff?
I'm just curious, are any of these city contracts? Some of these power washers are cleaning the sidewalks and things like that. So is that something the city can take an approach to and say, hey, we will start scheduling these during better hours or something like that?
So actually, Jeff, to answer that, when we did the 60-day cleanup, the downtown, one of our trucks was actually pressure washing on Battery Park Ave. I got in touch with our streets guy and they understood that not cool. We have to lead by example. So they won't, I think they did another type of a similar project again afterwards, but they wouldn't start until 7 o'clock. So the other ones that I have issues with, one of them I really have an issue with, he's not the nicest person to work with, just gave me a really hard time. But internally with our city folks, our department was great and said, hey, you're right. We should start at 7 o'clock.
Okay, thanks for answering.
Of course.
Todd?
Yeah, and just for everyone's awareness, there are organizations that operate in the city that we don't have any control over. So when DOT was going through and doing the expansion or the shrinkage or whatever you want to phrase, Merriman, I think it was, we got complaints about them at all hours of the night because they were out there with night crews working. And all we can do is go to DOT and say, hey, could you have your contractors, be a little more aware of when they're working, that sort of thing. So there are times where we just can't do anything from a legal standpoint about what's producing the noise, but because we just don't have any influence or control over Department of Transportation. That's a state, organization, so they get to do what they want. But there's just, something else to keep in the back of your brain there.
Thank you. All right. Any other thoughts on the noise of power washing? Okay. Does anybody, do you, Jessica, what did we decide to discuss the emails that we received through Daniel? Do you guys want to tackle those emails? 2 emails that we received. Jeff, Dave, I'm not sure if you saw those or not. It was part of the package that Ashley sent out. One had to do with noise levels at the VA. The other had to do with further complaints at the salvage station. Both of them apparently are common complainers or frequent complainers, I guess I should say. And Todd, you had mentioned, you had spoken about both of them earlier. If you'd like to repeat that.
Yeah, it's so the complaints about salvage station are, they occur every summer. I made the comment earlier that if we could have done something about salvage station at this point, we certainly would have. The other thought that I had earlier about salvage station, or that the complaint about salvage station sparked for me, was that if you look at Rabbit as a live venue in the city versus salvage station, the amount of cooperation and compliance that we get between the two is like night and day. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that the board should explore going forward is not approaching venues, live music venues, from not just a noise ordinance standpoint, but maybe from a zoning standpoint as well. And there are ways that we could be able to apply a little more pressure to venues like salvage station from a zoning perspective. Like their permit to operate from the very beginning could come with strings that apply certain noise obligations or noise mitigation obligations, that sort of thing. I'm just throwing this out there because I have not researched this at all, but I don't see why, in order to prevent, because salvage station got started when it was kind of like the wild, wild west for live music venues here in the city, and there was absolutely no regulation, or from my understanding anyway. I wasn't here, of course. Maybe Mark can jump in on this with a little bit more background if he feels it's necessary. But I don't see why long term we couldn't come up with maybe some zoning regulation that would help us mitigate a lot of the stuff that Rabbit already does voluntarily. Is certainly doable by any other live music venue that wants to set up shop here in the city. So, just as an example. And then the other one is the VA. We don't get a lot of complaints from the VA, but the majority of the ones that we do get come from a small group of people. And we have never found the VA to be out of compliance. They are extremely cooperative. They have always wanted to be a good neighbor and have worked with us on whatever suggestions or whatever information we've asked for. And, certainly not trying to dissuade anybody from complaining here, but what I am trying to say is we have done what we can with the VA, and they have been more than cooperative to help us out, try to mitigate the sources of the complaints and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to you make sure the board's aware of those two different perspectives on those complaints.
With respect really to both of these complaints, I'm assuming that each of them are in residential districts. So there are no sound level limits. I think, what is the limit from industrial? 65. Commercial industrial has a sound level limit of 65, but there are no sound level limits within a residential district. So are they complaining on a nuisance basis?
Yeah, so it's
So salvage station is zoned river commercial zone, which then falls under decibel levels, which is 65 daytime, 57 nighttime.
Correct.
and if we go anywhere in the city and measure the level of that sound, it doesn't matter what zone we're standing in. The
Correct.
zone that the business is in is the one that applies. So
Correct.
we can be standing on the hill above, salvage station in a residential district and measure 64, and it will feel like it's loud. It will sound like it's loud, like it's a disturbance. But as long as they're under 65, there's not a violation.
Correct.
So that
That's
again, as we've discussed many times before, is the problem that we're still wrestling with decibel levels in industrial commercial zones versus what's actually being heard in residential zones, and how do we work that out?
Is that something that we should discuss with the committee? Are we prepared as a group to make any recommendations about what that would look like? How this has been a problem since the advent of the ordinance itself. How to control noise that comes from commercial to residential when it's 65 decibels. 65 decibels is not bad if you're sitting in the CBD, but if you're sitting in a neighborhood, 65 decibels is pretty loud. But I mean, the only thing you could do is adjust the sound level limits. I don't know of another solution unless someone has one.
So I think there was actually in one of the complaints, there was a suggestion that maybe it be based on distance from the source. And if you're, half a mile away and it's 64 at your location, it's obviously going to be much louder than that probably. I don't know that I can't say that for a fact, but using distance as a way to scale that decibel level might be one way to approach it. But that's for the noise and sound experts to really dig into. I'm just the enforcement expert.
Okay. Any other thoughts about the two emails and what that might mean by way of policy or recommendations to the committee?
I just think it's one of those things that we've talked about and we just haven't had, it's kind of like Todd was saying, is like, I think it's something that requires a bigger conversation with some, people in the field of how sound travels, right? To figure that out. Because the thing is like, what's interesting is when you see I went through the dashboard today, for instance, and I was looking, comparing notes to like the complaints that have come in from salvage station, and then the last measurements that Chris and Daniel have done. And it does, obviously, because they're public, it doesn't give you the exact address. But going through these ones and looking at the summaries where it tells you, the limit is that they're taken at 806, and then what the limit is considered commercial is 65. And then the decibel readings are 51, 50, 53, 62.2, 59.6, 59.1, 57.2, 57.9, 49.3, 49.9, right? Is just, they're all except for one of them at least 5 decibels below what the level is. So, you know, I know that like all sorts of things matter, right? For sound traveling, it's just weather, for instance, plays a factor in that. And I'm not going to pretend like I know all of the factors in terms of what happens with how sound travels. But I think it's just one of those things. It's just, we've been challenged by this, right? When the residential adjacent to commercial districts or industrial districts. But it's definitely, it's a big piece of it's a big thing for us to chew on. So if that's something that we want to put a focus on, I think this might be a perfect thing for a subcommittee, Reb.
Actually, I think there is one. I think I was the chair of it, but it kind of got lost in many other discussions. And it has been, as I mentioned before, it's been an enormous issue from the very beginning. And it's a problem, particularly in Asheville, because the commercial streets run adjacent to and through many neighborhoods, West Asheville, Kenilworth, and others. And it's just very difficult. I mean, the answer could well be that there needs to be some reduction in sound level limits, but we well know that the ordinance was developed with the lowest sound level limits that council would accept at the time. So that's the argument you have to reopen and find out what the appetite is for that conversation within the council. And that's a tricky one because that goes straight to economic development. That goes to a lot of big issues within the city. So we can take it on as an issue and continue to talk about it. It's not going to go away. So maybe we revive the efforts of that subcommittee. And maybe we don't necessarily raise that at this point with the Environment and Safety Committee because we don't know what the answer is yet.
I don't think we're ready to present on that.
I don't know.
I think that we have a lot of other issues that that we've been putting energy into. So
I would agree. Okay. Any other new business? Oops, except my cat. All right. There being no other new business, Todd, do we have any folks on the line?
We do not.
We do not. Any other items of business that someone would like to bring up today? That being the case, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
So moved. Second?
I'll second.
I'll take a hand count. All in favor? All right. Thank you. Mark, we'll talk to you this week via email and perhaps on the phone. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you all.